All right, we are live. Yeah, Mike, I'm solo tonight. Um, couldn't get anybody to come on that wanted to talk about fix my hat. Hat doesn't fit me right because this whole COVID. I haven't had a haircut since Vietnam. Um, Solo, nobody wanted to come on and talk Squarebills. Surprisingly, it is what it is. I can go solo. Just hopefully you guys are joining me and you guys are helping me out with the discussion, and we could all kind of help each other out. I'll wait for more people to get in. And I know I'm on a little bit of a delay, so I'll wait a little bit longer. To kill time, how's everybody been doing? Did anybody get out and go fishing today? Now that we're allowed to. I saw some guys in the club got out and they caught them, and some guys in the boats got out and they caught them. So, sorry, I'm just trying to organize baits right now. We've got baits spread out all over the table. Hopefully we get a lot of people tonight. I'm not sure. My preparation for this beforehand has been not as good as I had wanted it to be, just because personal life stuff with this COVID and me trying to figure out what's going to happen with work and all that stuff. So we'll get it kicked off. I know not a lot of people are in yet, but hopefully people will kind of filter in. And I'll go on Facebook as well and make a little post to hopefully get some more numbers in here. There we go. Now people are chiming in. Nice. Thanks, John. Thanks, Cali Bass Kid. I do throw Cotton Cordell, Cali Bass Kid. I have one right here, as a matter of fact. And we'll get into baits. We'll get into everything squarebill fishing. So we'll kick it off now. People are starting to filter in. If you've never been here and joined us for a discussion on live, we cannot talk about the virus. We cannot mention the virus, the name of the virus, and all that good stuff, because apparently YouTube will get rid of the video. So we already know about it. We know what's going on locally. We can get into that discussion later. After hours is what I call it, but we'll kick it off with squarebill talk. So the way tonight's going to go is, it's all squarebills. We're talking squarebill crankbait fishing. So from gear to baits to seasons to everything in between, anything anybody wants to talk about, we'll talk about. There's a lot of knowledge between us all, and hopefully we get more people in here. We've been average anywhere from 12 to 16, with the worst being 8. So we'll see how tonight goes. We're starting off a little rough numbers-wise, but maybe people will trickle in. And I know that everything is starting to get a little bit back to normal, so I'm sure that we'll lose people to work and things like that, and then people preparing to go fishing tomorrow. So, again, no virus talk, and we'll hop into it. So the outline of how tonight's going to go is kind of what I said earlier. We're going to talk about anything that you guys want to discuss squarebill crankbait fishing, whether you want to come in and share some knowledge or you've got questions. Between all of us, we can get a lot of stuff answered. And again, this is just opinions. None of us are claiming to be experts. The only reason why this is set up on my channel was because it was just an idea that me and Mark Chrisman, the president of the club, had. And I knew how to go live on YouTube, so I don't come on here claiming to be an expert on any of these topics, and that's why I like everybody to join in on the discussion and kind of help each other out, because we've all got different experiences. A lot of us have fished in different areas of the country, and a lot of us throw different baits with different gear, and hopefully everyone's here to share some knowledge. What's up, Aaron? Thanks for joining. So we'll get it started. Squarebill crankbaits. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go into equipment, and again, this is all just kind of what I have equipment wise or what I prefer equipment wise. Starting it off with the reels. So we've talked crankbaits before, especially the guys that know me. I love crankbait fishing. It's my favorite thing to do, and square bills is probably my overall favorite way to fish. So the reels, I like at least a 6-to-1 ratio reel, being my absolute slowest for a square bill. Now, for a mid diver or a deep diver, I throw very slow ratios, just because I want to get that bait down there. And for a square bill crankbait, most of the time I'm burning the crankbait, so it's a lot more of that, um, you know, uh, burn, 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 pause. If you've watched Tactical Bassin type, it's much different than the deep grinding of crankbaits. So at least I think the fastest or the slowest I throw is a 6.8-to-1. It is Okuma reel that I have, Komodo. And so you're going to want a fast reel capable of burning the bait. And, you know, most of mine that I throw on my square bill setups are a 7-to-1. So, again, you're rarely going to fish it slow, but there are times where you will fish the crankbait slower than you would, say, during the summertime or the springtime, and we'll get into that. So it doesn't have to be a fancy reel. I throw the Abu Garcia. Man, now I'm drawing a blank on it, but it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Just something quick that you're comfortable with, and you know, you could bomb some casts with and cover a lot of water. Rods, very similar to the lipless rods that we talked about 2 weeks ago. You're going to want that soft tip. You're going to want a parabolic rod. A lot of people are going to prefer glass. I have a glass square bill rod. I do not like it as much as my composite rod, but the glass rod is going to work fine. You're going to want that rod to absorb the bite, and then you're going to sweep into those hook sets ideally. But in a kayak, it's always going to be a little bit different sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to move to the side and sweep into them. Sometimes you just got to come straight up. And then at that point, once you get that fish hooked, I'd recommend putting the rod back down because you're already in shallow water. And when those fish come out of the water, they've got more leverage to throw that bait out of the water than they do down in the water. So you're already going to have the challenge of keeping them underneath the water. So if you set that hook straight up, a lot of times it'll bring them out of the water, which you're not going to want. So, ideally you want it short because you are going to be casting at cover. So with these square bills, as most of you, probably all of you know, you're going to be bringing this thing through cover. It is a 4x4 style of bait. You can fish it pretty much in anything. Not exactly in weeds, but more over the top of weeds, ticking the tops of weeds. So a short rod where you can look at a stump and you want to put it exactly on the shaded side of that stump and then bounce into the side of it, you're going to want a shorter rod to be a lot more accurate. So most of the pros, doing the research before coming live tonight, fish anything between a 6.8 and a 7.2 was pretty much, 7.2 was the longest. And then it also depended on some of the pros. Obviously, they have as many rods as they want. If they're going to be fishing in weed flats, like pre-spawn when they're moving into those spawning grounds, guys will go up to a 7.6 just to get that bait launched a little bit farther. But again, there's different ways to fish a square bill, and if you can afford to have multiple square bill rods, then that might be a dedicated square bill rod to just weed flats. Hey, Kurt, thanks for tuning in. No worries, man. I know everybody's working and, things are picking up here with the whole virus. So I appreciate you tuning in. Line, I almost always throw 10-pound Seagar Brazex, and that's just for here in San Diego. If I'm going somewhere else, like we fished Kentucky Lake in the national championship KBF in 2018, and a lot of riprap. That place is known for square bills. I threw a square bill like the entire time. I was at 12 to 14 pound line just because of their rocks and their riprap there are a lot different than ours here. Our rocks and our riprap is very few and far between. Most lakes here don't even really have it on the shoreline. And Kentucky Lake, that's all the shoreline was. So I wanted that abrasion resistance. I wanted a little bit stronger line, and the water isn't as clear as we have here in San Diego. So that's another thing we'll get into. A lot of these lakes, it isn't ideal to throw a square bill, but we'll talk about the lakes where it's better to be throwing a square bill. And we'll get into that later. So 10 pound Seagar Brazex, I've gone up to 14 pound before. And again, the smaller line, pound wise, diameter wise, you're going to get that bait deeper. And when I'm talking square bill crankbait fishing, to me personally, that means 8 feet. I can get my baits down to 8 feet. My average square bill is 8 feet if I have the rod tip low and in the water and I'm fishing 10 pound line. But most of the time I'm in that 6 foot range. And then we can go into the big deep diving square bills later. We'll get into those because those are some sleeper baits. And it seems like companies are now starting to come out with them more. Strike King recently made one. So that's cool to see because you can now get a deeper bait, 10 to 12 feet, that can come through cover a lot better than, say, a 10 to 12 feet rounded bill. So this is an old bomber I've had forever, and now I'm excited to see Strike King's making one just like it. So hooks, same thing that I pretty much went over 2 weeks ago with the lipless crankbaits. I throw EWGs on all my baits. I was watching a couple Fluke Master videos about Squarebill crankbait fishing yesterday, and he talked about he doesn't really change out his hooks anymore because he believes in the companies now starting to bring better hooks on baits. But he said back in the day, if you've got old baits from the 90s, just throw them away because it's not worth it. He would rather have a hook, and those hooks were garbage. For me, it's just a personal preference. It is a confidence thing for me to have my favorite hooks on my baits, and it's very expensive to do that. I have boxes and boxes full of regular treble hooks from Strike King and all sorts of other companies that I buy for my square bills. So if anybody wants treble hooks, I've offered to give them away before. I've got a lot of treble hooks from every kind of company you could imagine that I've just kept, and I'm never going to use them. So I was just going to give them away to somebody. But I throw the KVD Mustad EWG short shank hooks most of the time a size 4. Even if it's a really small bait, I will upgrade to a size 4 because they're the short shank. You're not going to get them twisted up with other. So I'm trying to find one. I have quite a few. So that's an EWG size 4. I believe this might have came with a size 6. But because you have the short shanks on them, you can get away with a bigger hook and they're not going to tangle up with each other. So those hooks aren't able to grab each other because the shank length is shortened. So I get away with a little bit beefier hook, which is going to get the bait down a little bit deeper. And in San Diego, everybody knows we have giant fish, so I prefer a stouter, bigger, stronger hook than I would a smaller hook. Again, that's just me, but those are my favorite. Another one that I'm curious to try out now after doing a lot more of this research. I've pretty much watched every type of square bill popular YouTube video you could find this week. And one of the hooks that was mentioned a lot that I've never tried before was an Owner. Apparently, Owner makes a short shank EWG, and a lot of people were talking about that one. So I'm curious. I'll probably make a purchase and kind of test it against the Mustad. But I'm a huge fan of KVD, and that guy is my favorite fisherman of all time. So if he's got a hook out there and that's the hook he uses, I'm going to use it. Hey JD, man. I'll be hitting up Murray this weekend. Nice. Thanks for joining. I appreciate everybody tuning in. We're starting to get up a little bit in numbers wise. Hopefully we get some more. So that's the gear. That's the hooks, the line, the rods, the reels. I have dedicated Squarebill rods, which some people would find to be a little bit overkill, and I'm never going to argue that's overkill, just because fishing is so expensive these days. But I like to have several different Squarebill rods to tie on several different size or sounds or colors. I feel like I already waste enough time paddling against you guys in tournaments, so I want to have rods where I can just reach back, grab it, and start firing, say, a different color or a different sound or a different size instead of cutting, retying. And we'll get into snaps against split rings later. Sorry, you guys hear my blind dog in the background. Um, Super old, and she's walking around running into everything right now. And there she goes. All right. So right now I'll go over different styles. So we went over gear. Let's go over the different styles, meaning the more along the lines of the sounds. So everybody knows, most people know that there are different sounds in Squarebill crankbaits. So of course every single one I'm grabbing is the same. If you guys don't know, I'm a big believer in the one knocker. For some reason, that's just my favorite. I get a lot of bites on it. So it is not the first crankbait that I will tie on. The first crankbait I'll tie on, especially in San Diego, is going to be a silent. So no sound at all. And a lot of people say that that is the finesse way to fish a crankbait, or it's the finesse style is to go with the silent crankbait. Tim Little from Tactical Bassin is the same way. He'll start out with a silent and then he'll move on, and that's exactly what I do. So silent crankbait's the way I'm going to go. It's just more natural, right? And if you're going down the shore and somebody else is throwing a Squarebill in front of you, most of the time they're going to be throwing a Squarebill that has rattles. And that's probably the most popular. Secondary to that would be a one knocker, and then the last thing they're probably going to be throwing is a silent. So I will always go against the crowd, against the pressure, and I'm going to throw a silent bait. It's just more natural. That is a M9 Squarebill from Skirmish Baits. That color is deadly here. It's like a pink craw, and it's got that see-through, so it's great for clear water. Next, I'll move on to the one knocker. And the one knocker is kind of taken off lately. Not lately, but within the last few years, the one knocker has become a lot more popular. When it first came out, it was, something that the bass had never heard before. And a lot of people that were throwing it were getting bigger bites and more bites over the rattle. But now every company pretty much makes a silent, a one knocker, and a rattle. So try to find out what your fish prefer. I'll always start silent on my other rod. I'll have a one knocker, and then usually I will have a rattle ready to go. And then for rattles, just your typical rattles. And every bait is going to be different. That's a bandit. That's more of a one knocker. So look at what you're buying on Tackle Warehouse or wherever you're going to buy these baits, and it should say if they're a silent, should say if they are a one knocker or it has rattles. And a lot of stuff nowadays is getting crazy. They're putting tungsten in the baits mixed with brass and getting all sorts of different sounds. And I am a believer in that type of stuff. I'm a believer in being different, and I've always been that way. But there's plenty of pros out there that say don't get caught up in that stuff and just go fish, a simple rattle and a simple silent bait and a simple one knocker, and you're going to get bit. So I fall for the stupid stuff like that. That's probably why they make all their money fishing and I just spend my money fishing. So, but that's just how I am. I've always been that way. I get caught up in the new stuff way too much. So going back through that again, and this is kind of what I read or watched on YouTube videos. A lot of the guys say silent is going to be more for your pressured waters. It's going to be a lot better for your clear water. So that's a big point that I forgot to cover. I'm definitely going to throw in the clear water, the silent first, and probably stick with it longer, just because they are visual feeders. So they need to see it. And a lot of times, you know, how it's more realistic for a silent bait to come towards a fish and have that fish grab it than a bait in crystal clear water that's making a ton of noise. Because when those shad are swimming towards a bass and he's feeding after them, there's not a rattle that's going off behind him. That's more of a dirty water bait. And then you get into colors, stuff that's bold like that. This is a great Hodges color. It's just that bone white with an orange belly, and that's a one knocker. So a lot of times if I'm buying a color like this or a chartreuse color, I'm going to pick a bait that has some noise in it. You know, that one worked really well for me at Kentucky Lake just because that water was dingy. It's a copper and a chartreuse, just a different looking crankbait. So water clarity is big for what type of crankbait you're going to be throwing, and that includes size. So one of the biggest fish that I've lost in my life was actually on this bait right here, and that's a lot bigger. I believe this is the 4.0 from Strike King, but I mean the size difference in those two is massive. This is a 1 ounce bait, and I actually lost a really big fish on this bait at Lake Sutherland last year, and I still think about that fish a lot. But they were feeding on bluegill at Sutherland. I was watching them visually chase bluegill and pin them up against the shore. So once I saw that, I grabbed this thing because it's bigger, it's got that bigger profile, and it's got that bluegill color. And then as we all know, Sutherland's got dingier water. So I'm going to throw something like that. Got a big bite and lost it right at the net. I don't know if it would have been my PB, but it was well over 5 pounds, and probably one of the last biggest fish that I've hooked into. So water clarity is big, and then pressure is another reason why you're going to change up from silent or change sounds and change colors. So moving on, we'll get a little bit more into colors. So a lot of the pros and a lot of the, you know, Fluke Master Tactical Bassin guys, they say that you're pretty much going to need 3 to 4 colors on your crankbaits. And, you know, for the springtime, you're going to be looking for that red. And that's just because the crawfish in the spring, that's when you're generally going to be throwing those red colors. And that's when the fish are going to be feeding up on those crawfish. There's another one from Black Label. These are balsas. One of the biggest squarebill fish I've ever caught at Kentucky Lake on day 1 of the national championship was on that color right there. So that's going to be the time in San Diego where I throw the red baits, and that's pretty much it. So it's only going to be, you know, that pre-spawn bite. And to be honest, I haven't had great success throwing the red squarebills in San Diego, except for one day. And I'll show you the exact bait it was on. This bait at Lake Murray, one day for me, was just on fire. And that's a real dark red bait with just the gold highlights coming down the side and the black back. For whatever reason, that was a pre-spawn bite, and they just wanted that red crankbait. You know, so that's going to be the only time I'm going to throw the crawdad colors. 75% of the time, I'm going to be throwing the shad colors, simple shad patterns. I would say my absolute favorite color, if I could find it real quick in San Diego, is that guy right there. That's a M9 Squarebill from Skirmish Baits, and I'm drawing a blank on the color right now, the name of the color, but if anybody wants it, I can get it to you. But that's probably my favorite color, and it's a weird color. You know, it's got the bronze and then the silver shad scales and the white body with a little bit of orange underneath the chin. That color's probably been my most productive color out here in San Diego, and probably the one I'm going to go to first if I think they're on a shad bite. And then if I get into schools of shad and I know they're in schools of shad, I want to grab something that's got a lot of flash to it. So I'll go with like a chrome bait. So obviously in San Diego, a lot of the times, most of the time, the sun is up high and we have bright blue skies. So if you've got shad, you know, that's when you're going to throw your underspins on a swim bait. But if you've got a crankbait tied on and they're pushed up shallow, go with something that has a ton of flash that's going to kind of separate your bait from the actual bait fish. And that's the time when I'll go to those flashier color baits. So I guess that covers the colors. Like I said, 75% of the time I'll do shads, and then bluegill as well. If bluegill would be more now, if I'm going to go throw a squarebill, I'm going to be throwing bluegill colors. And of course, I'm struggling to find my favorite one. There it is. That's my favorite bluegill color. Just a real detailed bluegill color bait. That's Skirmish Baits. I used to be promotional staff for them, so I have a ton of their crankbaits. I like them a lot, and that's my favorite bluegill color to throw. But anything that looks like a bluegill, this color has actually done really well for me post spawn as well. That citrus shad color. I don't know if they think it's a bluegill or what, but once those bluegills start bedding down, I'll find those beds and then I'll push shallow towards the shore of where those beds are, and then I'll throw bluegill type of colors. Anything that's gonna be somewhat similar to a bluegill. And believe it or not, this little guy, this Spro, the Little John in this color, I think it's called Spring Craw, has done pretty well for me out here as well. And that's more of a tighter action, but for some reason at lower Otay, that color's done pretty well for me. Yeah, one knockers at Sutherland, definitely. I love Sutherland, and hopefully they bring it back. We'll see. So, hopefully I'm not missing any questions. But with just me, there's no moderator, so it's tough. So that's colors. Post spawn, they're going to be feeding on bluegills, so look for the bluegills. 75% of the time, I'm going to be throwing shad colors around here. And then there is going to be the times pre-spawn where I'm throwing those red color crankbaits. I do have every type of color that you could imagine sitting in front of me right now. From orange and white to, all sorts of different colors. Root beer is another good one. If you want to throw a root beer color like that, the green back with the brown splatter, white belly, orange chin, that color has worked for me all year round. That's always just been a good color for me, but I switch out colors a lot. Again, I'm real anal about just little details in fishing that I try to trick myself into believing they matter. And sometimes I feel like they do, and other times they don't, and you can just go with whatever your favorite color is and throw it down the shore and get a reaction bite. So you don't have to have a million colors. Like I said, most of the pros and the fluke masters and tactical bassins say that you can get away with just 4 colors and you'll be fine for squarebill fishing. All right, so retrieves. Probably the most important thing, at least for me when I'm squarebill fishing, is the retrieve. One thing that I see a lot of from people that are just kind of getting into crankbait fishing is they'll just cast out and they'll wind back. And that's something that I guess when guys get lazy or they're tired or they haven't caught a fish or haven't been bit in a long time, you'll kind of fall into that trance of doing that. I'm definitely guilty of it. If you've been skunked for the past 4 hours and you're just thrown out there, you're very unmotivated. Shh, hey, quiet. I'm live. You're embarrassing me in front of my friends. Sorry, my daughters are eating Cheetos. So try not to just cast out and wind. You're gonna be mixing up your retrieves. And then when you do get bit, hopefully remember what retrieve you're using and try to keep throwing that retrieve and see if that's what the fish wants. But usually with the squarebill, I'm going to start off burning it, especially if it's warm water or the warmer times of the year. I'm going to burn that thing as fast as I can. If it's clear water, I'm going to burn it really fast because I don't want them to get a look at the bait. If it's dingier water, or I can go a little bit slower, throw those little bit brighter colors, and get away with a slower retrieve. But you could never go wrong with what I call the tactical bass and retrieve, which they talk about a lot, which is the burn, 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 pause, burn, burn, pause, burn, pause. That always works. But to me, that's more of an unknown bank that you're fishing. So if I'm fishing a bank and I don't really know what's underneath the water, it could just be a flat bank, or it could be a couple stumps that you don't even know they're there. That's when I'll do that. If I know that there's targets and I know exactly where those targets are, I'm going to burn to those targets, hit the targets, and then pause. It's not random pausing. It's, hey, I know that log's usually right there. I'm going to burn until I feel it hit the log, and then I'm going to pause it. And you're doing that because the bass are going to relate to that structure, and a lot of times when you bring that bait and you knock into that structure and you pause it in front of them, that's going to draw that reaction bite. They're just going to strike out at it, and most of the time you're going to get your bites on that pause. But again, if that's not working, then try to just keep burning it off that color or off that cover. I was watching a KVD video, and he was talking about how sometimes he does better when once he hits the cover, he burns the bait even faster. So he'll slowly reel to the cover, hit the cover, and then right when it hits the cover, he burns it. And to him, that is a shad basically seeing the fish, seeing the bass, and then panicking and trying to scurry away. So he says try that out. So, I mean, you could try any retrieve you want. Just don't get into the habit of, throwing it out there and just cranking it at one speed. Throw some pauses in there, throw some rod twitches in there, and you're going to have more bites. It's just the way it is. No shad is going to swim just straight like that. It's just not how it is, especially if they know a bass is anywhere near them. They are scampering to the side, or known as hunting. And they're trying to save their own life. They're not just going to stay at a steady speed and just bump into the bottom all the way at a steady speed while a bass is closing in on them. That's just not how it is. So throw in those pauses, start to burn it. Just try to make sure you are changing your retrieve, and then hopefully the bass tell you what they want. Once you get bit on that retrieve, keep doing that retrieve and see if it's more than just a lucky fish and it's something that is working for that day. And it's always going to be different. So mix them up, try different things out, and hopefully you find, what they like. All right. So the next thing I got is when to throw the square bill. How do you know when to throw it? Basically, in San Diego, me personally, because I throw them a lot, I always have a Squarebill Crankbait with me. That's 100% something I'm always going to have with me, unless it is a day where I'm trying stuff I'm not comfortable with. Because I'm very comfortable with crankbaits, it's my favorite way to fish. I always have them with me. They're my confidence baits, especially the Squarebill. So I'm bringing it, and I'm bringing it to places that a lot of people don't fish squarebills, especially in San Diego. You don't really see a lot of people throwing it at lower Otay, but I do throw it at lower Otay. I throw it a lot. So it gets bit. I mean, I've had 2 fish. The only time I've ever caught 2 fish on one bait on a Squarebill crankbait was at lower Otay. And I was fishing it right alongside the Tules. So I wrote down 3 out of the 4 seasons I throw the Squarebill crankbait. Except for the spawn. So I'm not going to throw it in the winter, and I will not throw it when they're spawning. I will throw it pre-spawn, and I will throw it post-spawn. But if the majority of the fish are currently spawning or actively spawning, I'm not really going to throw it. There's just better baits to throw. So I don't throw it in the winter, and I don't throw it when the majority of the bass are spawning. So what I gathered from all the research that I did, it's a great bait for covering a lot of water. It's well known for the pre-spawn. So a lot of people will get that pre-spawn bite. They'll think Squarebill crankbait fishing, and they're just a great bait to draw bites even if the fish aren't hungry. Again, those reaction strikes. But if they're up there and they're herding shad and they're busting against them on the bank and pinning them against the bank, you can't go wrong with the Squarebill. It's not going to get hung up. It comes through cover. And it's just a great pre-spawn bait. For currently right now, if I was going to go throw a Squarebill this weekend, the thing that's worked best for me during these months post-spawn, I'll go with a bluegill colored bait, and I'm going to be looking for the bluegill beds. If I could find the bluegill beds and they're in somewhat of shallow water, anywhere from 10 feet and below, I'll go to the closest bank to where that bluegill bed is, and I will throw that crankbait in 6 feet all the way up to 1 foot of water in a bluegill color, and I do pretty well doing that. If I can't find bluegill beds anywhere on the lake, they're just not there yet, or they're too deep for me to find them, I will use the crankbait to throw it in the top of the weed beds. And we talked about this 2 weeks ago on the lipless show. If you were here talking lipless crankbaits with me, it's the same thing. You're going to burn that bait over top of the weeds, hopefully, ticking the top of the weed beds and drawing those fish to come out and come get it. The difference between the squarebill and the lipless bait, if you were trying to decide, why would I throw the squarebill when we just talked about 2 weeks ago throwing a lipless in that same situation? Well, if you kill the lipless, what's going to happen? It's going to fall. If you kill a crankbait, what's going to happen? It's going to rise. So you're going to fish the lipless a lot faster than you are through those weed beds than a squarebill. You're going to throw the squarebill, it's going to be a slower speed, or it's going to burn out most of the time. And some crankbaits are better fishing faster than others. Girls, shh. You guys are about to get domestic violence charge. So some are made, we'll talk about that later, some are made to burn faster, but if you want to fish that crankbait over the top of the weed beds, a lot of times killing it after you tick that grass, rip it, so tick the top of the grass, rip your rod, and then kill it and let it float up. A lot of times you'll get bit that way. I don't know why they come out and bite it, especially when you kill it and let it float up, but they do. If you were going to do that with a lipless, unless it was a suspended or a floater, which are very rare, that thing's going to fall right in the weed bed and you're going to get caught on weeds. So there is a time and a place for throwing that squarebill in the weed beds. And again, I probably have more success throwing the squarebill over the weed beds than I do the lipless. But to be fair, I go to the squarebill more than I do the lipless just because it's my comfort bait and I have a lot of confidence in it more than I do the lipless, especially here in San Diego. So that's what I would do now if I was going to go throw it. Of course, you can go throw it just shallow and bang into cover, bang into stumps, bang into rocks any time of the year, and you're going to get bit. But a lot of our lakes have what I call snot grass, like Murray does. Murray's known for having this grass that just sticks to your hooks, and no matter how hard you rip the squarebill, that grass is going to stick on your hooks. You can't rip it off. It's super annoying. I call it snot grass. I don't know what it's called. Whenever I start hitting that stuff, it gets really frustrating to throw the squarebill, and I'll usually stop throwing it at that point and look more for the weed beds or the weed flats instead of going up shallow. And again, every lake is different. If I was at Sutherland, I'd be shallow throwing it all day long and catching a lot more fish than I would if I was at Murray throwing it. And that's just same thing with Hodges. Hodges is another great lake to throw a squarebill. One of the best lakes to throw a squarebill. Sutherland is another one. El Capitan is another one. Those lakes with a little bit dingier water, a lot of structure, and a lot of logs and rocks and things like that. That's where the squarebill shines here in San Diego. I kind of stay away. Like Miramar, I'm not throwing a squarebill. Very rarely will I throw a squarebill at Miramar. It's just not the right type of lake. Crystal clear water. I'd rather throw a jerkbait in shallow water, honestly. But let's talk about the fall. So the fall, the water temperature is going to begin to drop. So when the water temperature drops, I'm going to be fishing slower than I would right now. And that's kind of what I was talking about earlier. There's a very certain time where I'm going to fish the squarebill slow. It's going to be the fall. I don't fish in the winter. If you were going to fish in the winter, fish it slow. But our fish pull off deep here, at least from my experience. So I will fish the squarebill a little bit slower in the cold water, and I will throw flatter baits that have tighter actions. That's the Crush 75 from 6 cents. Awesome, awesome bait. Let's see what else. The Spro. The shad, they're going to be chasing shad in the fall. They're going to be schooling up and chasing shad in wolf packs. So I'm throwing colors like that, crystal clear, a tighter wiggle to them. than say a rounder. Something like this. This bait has a ton of wobble to it. This is the Black Label balsa bait. Has a ton of wobble to it, really wide wobble. More for when those bass are feeding up, hence the color of the bait. But once that water starts cooling down and we're getting down into like the lower 60s, high 50s, or mid 60s, I'm looking to throw something that's got a tighter, more natural action, and that's why those flat sides are made. So I usually will like to throw a flat side in the fall, and you do pretty well in the fall here because our water doesn't get too crazy cold. I feel like the Squarebill bite lasts a lot longer in San Diego than it does in other areas. But the Spro, the flat 75, and then what the pros were saying was look for boulders, look for stuff that's going to hold heat. And again, this is a little bit different because we're in San Diego and it's really warm, or Southern California and it's really warm. But when that water starts getting cold, the bass are going to look for that structure that holds heat, like boulders, and they're going to pull their body up tight against it. So it's kind of a dead giveaway of where those bass are going to be. If they're on that bank, they're going to be up tight against that stuff that holds the heat. So throw that Squarebill, knock it into that rock, pause it, and see what happens. But that tighter wiggle, more natural action, and look for stuff that's going to hold heat. Those bass are going to suck to that and then ambush shad as they go by. So don't be afraid to throw it in the fall. It definitely will work. And then obviously pre-spawn and then post-spawn, it's going to work as well. We kind of covered that. And then winter, again, you can throw it in the winter. I don't throw it in the winter. And then a lot of the pros were saying that they don't even bring their Squarebills out in the wintertime. So that's kind of covering the seasons. I don't know how well you guys have been doing on the Squarebill and your experience here in San Diego, but I don't throw it very much in the winter at all. Usually never. So now I've done a YouTube video before on Squarebill crankbait fishing and crankbait fishing overall on my channel that went into like extreme detail, and I didn't want to go into extreme detail on this just because it would take me forever. So I'll talk a little bit about kayak positioning, and I won't get too much into the weeds on it like I did in that other video, but we'll kind of cover like the very basics of stuff stuff you should be thinking about while you're throwing the Squarebill. The positioning of your kayak, where you should be casting the bait, whether you should be casting at an angle, a 45-degree angle, or you should be casting at parallel down the shore. And a lot of that is going to depend on how you propel your kayak. If you are like me and you've got a paddle, once I hook into that fish, it's me against the fish, and the kayak's going to go wherever the kayak goes. I don't mess with the paddle. I can't. There's no way that I can adjust where my kayak goes if I'm not anchored and I hook into a fish, because I'm using my two hands to fight the fish. So for me, I like to throw my Squarebills at a 45-degree angle because when I hook into the fish, I don't want to be traveling towards the fish. At least when I have that 45-degree angle, I've got a little bit of weight behind the boat for when I set that hook set, and then I'm not coming towards the fish, creating slack line and then causing that fish to throw the bait. So if you're a paddler like me, you're going to be looking to be throwing more at a 45-degree angle unless you're anchored. If you're anchored, you can throw anywhere you want, and that boat's not going to move when you set the hook. Now, if you're somebody that has the foot or the motor, you're in a Hobie or whatever, a Titan, whatever, you're going to be throwing down the bank, and you don't really have to worry about that as much. But if you do cast right off your bow straight ahead of you and you're moving forward and you do hook into a fish, ideally you're going to want to start backpedaling if you've got the pedals, or if you've got the motor, do whatever the heck you got to do to either stop the boat or hopefully go in reverse to kind of help you create that tension on the line so that bass doesn't throw your crankbait as easy. I don't know how easy that is for the motor guys or whatnot, but it's pretty easy for the pedal guys just to start reverse pedaling while they're fighting a fish. That's something that I would recommend. It's something that I've heard other anglers talk about. They lose a lot of fish crankbait fishing. And usually I talk about the hooks. In my opinion, it could be your hooks, or it could be the way that you're casting the bait down the shore. And use your kayak to your advantage. Just like a boat is going to use it to their advantage, use your kayak to your advantage, and know what you're going to do when you hook into a fish. So that's another thing I think about. If I have the shore to my right-hand side and I'm right-handed and I'm throwing and I'm reeling right-handed, if you set that hook and you side sweep to the right, you're bringing that fish into the tules, or you're bringing that fish into the structure that you don't want the fish to go into. So a lot of the times, if I throw down the right-hand side, I'm already telling myself in my mind while I'm reeling, if I get bit, I need to sweep left to get him away from that structure, because I do not want that fish right when it gets bit to run into that structure. That's another thing I think people don't really think about, and it's tough to think about that stuff because we're fishing in tournaments that are 8 hours long, and it's 80 degrees, and all you're thinking about is just why is the drop shot kicking my ass while I'm throwing the square bill? At least that's what I think about. Or why am I fishing, and why do I spend so much money on gear if I suck this bad? That's another thing I think about. If you're in the zone, or you're just super concentrated or whatever, that's the stuff that I should be thinking about, and I'm guilty of just not thinking about it a lot of times. And then right when you set that hook and you sweep to the wrong side, you instantly tell yourself, what the hell am I doing? I should have side swept to the other side. So little things like that I feel like separate the really good anglers from the average angler, and it's just stuff that was talked about in a past video that I did, and then a bunch of the stuff that I watched today with Fluke Master Tactical Bassin. They don't really get into the tournament talk too much, but if you could find guys that are tournament fishermen and they kind of want to share a little bit of their secrets, they talk about stuff like that. Always being prepared for, hey, once I make this cast, if I get bit, what am I doing? It's not a surprise to you on how you're going to try to land it and all that stuff. So just try to keep focused, and a lot of that is a combination of a bunch of different things. Just being in the moment there, not being too hot, not being too cold, being comfortable, and just thinking about at any moment I could hook into the winning fish for this tournament. What am I going to do right now if I hook into that fish? So think about that type of stuff, especially if you're into the tournaments. It's just, it's good to keep your mind going in those tournaments, especially those slow days as well, instead of kind of just thinking about stuff you shouldn't be thinking about. So think about those casts, think about the angles. Another thing is, if you're hitting a piece of structure and you're not getting bit, think about switching angles. Go down the shore, turn around, and then cast at it from the other side. That was something that I was guilty of really never doing, and then I started doing it more a couple years ago, and it was actually working way better than I thought it would. And that's just attacking stumps or attacking boulders from a different angle, bringing it on the opposite side. And it's worked before for me, so now I'm a pretty big believer in it, especially if it's a piece of structure that is basically the only structure on that shore. So if it's going to be the only structure on that shore and it's a lake full of structure, then you might as well attack it from all angles, because the majority of the time those fish are going to be held up if they're on that bank right there. So give that piece of structure extra attention. Now, if you're on a bank that's got a ton of it, then yeah, you're not going to be able to do that at every piece of structure. But again, with these square bills, they come through everything. So do not be afraid to throw them. Do not be afraid to lose them. That's another tip that I tell people, like Hodges. Guys will talk about, oh, my laptop's dying. I forgot to plug it in. So let me plug in the laptop real quick. This will take 2 seconds. So talking to people about Hodges, there's guys that will refuse to throw a square bill at Hodges because they're afraid of losing baits. I disagree with that. I disagree with that thought process, because the square bill is such an ideal bait to throw into that structure, that you just can't be afraid to lose a $6 or a $7 bait, especially if it's in a tournament. And then if you're that afraid to lose the bait and you're going to spend that much money on the baits or however much money you're spending on these baits, buy a lure retriever. I have one called a Hound Dog. I was supposed to bring it out, and that's one thing I forgot to do. I was going to show you guys my lure retriever. But at Hodges or anywhere I go, it's always in my kayak. It's a dog leash, and if you guys want to see it, I could put it on the SoCal Kayak Anglers page. It's a dog leash that's connected to a Hound Dog lure retriever. You could see them on Tackle Warehouse. You put it on your line, you hit the button on the dog leash, it slides down. It's just a weight. It's in the shape of a hound dog, and the nose of the hound dog will punch your bait off of a stump or off of whatever you're stuck on, and that bait will float right back up. You reel it in, your dog retriever's on it already, and you get it all back. It's quick. I recommend practicing with it before you're going to use it in a tournament, because you do need to get straight above the bait, just because you need that hound dog to slide down super fast and hit it. If you're at an angle, it's not going to slide down super fast because it doesn't have gravity, and a lot of times you're not able to punch the bait free. So get directly over the top of the bait, and there's videos on YouTube about how to use the lure retriever from the hound dog or any other type that you're going to buy. Get straight over the top, let gravity take over, it slides down that line, smashes into it, and you get your baits back. I learned that lesson at Hodges many times before I finally decided to buy one, and now I've recovered every bait, every Squarebill that I have hooked up in the past year at Hodges. I've got back except for one. It couldn't punch for some reason. One of the baits free, and I don't know why. I don't know what the bait was hooked on. I never found out, obviously, because I didn't get it back, but I mean, I can't even tell you how much money that Hound Dog Lure Retriever has saved, and it's only like $14. So you save 2 baits with it, you get your money's worth out of it right there. And yeah, and exactly what Aaron says. It doesn't matter what you throw at Hodges, you're going to lose baits regardless. And I'm telling you, if you're not throwing a Squarebill at Hodges, you're missing out. You need to be throwing one at Hodges. I promise you, you are going to get bit 100%. You're going to get bit at Hodges if you throw a Squarebill. Bright colors, think bright colors, and something that's loud, something that's big, something that moves a lot of water, depending on how stained the water is, and you're going to get bit for sure. Bolder colors, brighter colors, stuff that's easier to see, and you're going to get bit. It's just one of the better baits to throw, in my opinion, at Hodges. And you don't have to do it all day. Just find those stretches of good shoreline and throw it out there. Crank, 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 crank. As you're moving on to another spot, say if you're going to go flip bushes or whatever, and then put it away, put it behind you, and grab your flipping rod and go flip. But it's something that while you're moving from position to position, even if you're not comfortable with the Squarebill, I would definitely have one, and I would definitely bring it. And I'm sure that many guys that fish Hodges and throw Squarebills can attest to that, because I've seen some absolute monsters caught there from a kayak on a Squarebill. And I'm thinking of Kenny Jablecki's huge fish that he caught 2 years ago at Hodges. It was probably one of the biggest fish that I've seen caught in San Diego in a kayak. Unfortunately, he didn't have a weight, and he's not on tonight watching, but I think it was 26 plus inches, mouth closed, 26 plus inches. It looked like a double digit for sure to me, but he didn't have a scale. So, that was at Hodges. That was on a Squarebill. It was on a Strike King 1.5. Of course, I have the bait, but it would take me forever to find it. And I don't see it anywhere in my vicinity of grabbing. It was just a normal color. Where is it? Just your basic color. That's green gizzard shad. I don't believe it was green gizzard shad, but that's the bait right there. And he caught a monster throwing a Squarebill. 26 inches, probably one of the biggest fish I've seen. Maybe even the biggest fish I've seen in a kayak. And that was on a Squarebill at Hodges. So don't be afraid to throw it, especially at Hodges. Sutherland, I know that JD is on here. I don't know if he's still with us, but Sutherland's his home lake, good buddy of mine, and that's a great lake to throw a Squarebill. I'm not sure if he Squarebills a lot there, but I had a 20 fish day last year at Hodges on a squarebill and a squarebill only, and I threw that one right there. 20 fish in one day, all on a squarebill. It was awesome. I put a video up. It's on my YouTube channel. It's the one where I go face my fears of meeting a wild horse for the first time. That's the day. And I caught so many fish that day that my GoPro ran out. I don't remember how many actually got on video, but yeah, it was one of the best days I've ever had in San Diego catching numbers. It felt like I was at Barrett, and they were all on that squarebill. None of them were big. That was the worst part about it, was they were all like 14, 15, 16 inchers. But the next day, I went back, and that was when I lost the big one on that bait. So I just upped the size of the squarebill. I got a bigger bite. And I had seen them chasing bluegill by the dock, so I switched to that color. Bigger profile, got a bigger bite, lost the fish. But that lake was on fire with the squarebill, and that was last summer. And yeah, now it's hopefully we get that lake back because it's a great squarebill lake. Again, El Capitan's another one. Those are probably my three favorite: El Capitan, Sutherland, and Hodges. I'm not sure how often you guys squarebill crankbait fish in here, but it would be nice to hear, how you guys do on it. What's your, is it a confidence bait for you guys, or is it something that you guys kind of struggle with and are trying to learn about? Because if you ever want to talk to me about crankbait fishing, I can give advice on what I do, but I throw them a lot. I'm not the best fisherman ever, but it is definitely a confidence bait for me. I do a lot of research into it. So if you're ever curious on that type of stuff, I've talked to plenty of members before about setups and things like that, or just showing you my setups or letting you even use my setups. I'll let you throw my rods, and if you like it, just having the right rods, having the right gear, definitely, it's going to make it easier, and you're going to hook up, with more fish and not lose them. So don't be afraid to throw them. They work. I promise you'll enjoy it. And then if you plan on traveling the country, it's just a bait that you always want to have with you. Everywhere that I've gone and traveled to do national tournaments or KBF Western region tournaments, I've always brought a squarebill with me. And, just if you got questions, let me know. But that's almost the end of it, and then we'll get into after hours. I've got some tricks and stuff that I'll show you guys here real quick. So let's see. I'm just going over my notes real quick. I talked about the hound dog lure retriever. I talked about pausing the bait after you hit structure. This is just all the stuff that I wrote down watching YouTube videos. Fish will be near the structure. Bounce the bait off the structure and kill it. That draws the bass out from the structure to come grab it. We talked about that. So tricks. Some of the best tricks that I have heard of and actually used. Stuff that I don't think I've ever told anybody, but I'll tell you guys because you guys stuck in here for an hour and you listen to some stupid idiot talk about squarebill fishing. So I don't know if this works, but I watched a video a long time ago about doing this, and I've done it, and I've caught fish doing it, and I don't know if it actually worked or not, but I'll tell you guys what it is because it's interesting. When you're fishing a place and the bass have more of a white or a how do I put this, a duller tint to them. So a lot of times in San Diego or the Delta or that high vegetation lakes, you catch a bass that's got that real dark color to it, that dark back. It's almost like black. Those fish will change colors where they've been in that lake. So if it's a crystal clear lake or a river, a lot of times you're going to get those bass that are a lighter color, especially when we went and fished in Kentucky. We were catching those Kentucky lake bass, and they were almost white. They were the lightest green I'd ever seen. Havasu has bass like this too, where those river bass, they're a little bit lighter of a color. So one of the pros, I can't remember who it was, he talked about the bait fish are also the same way in those bodies of water. So if you're catching bass that are really light at Havasu or at Kentucky Lake or wherever you're going A lot of ours are dark here, so this doesn't really apply here, but for anywhere else or anybody that's watching with water clarity like that and bass that are a whiter color, they take a nail file, like your girlfriend's nail filer, or very fine grit sandpaper, and they just sandpaper the bait, and it dulls the shine off the bait, that glossy shine off the bait, and it makes that more of the bait fish color with that dull lighter color. Another trick is to put it on your dash in your vehicle. So like if you had a chartreuse bait and you didn't really like how bright the chartreuse color was and you wanted a little bit of a lighter chartreuse color, they put it on the dash of their vehicle, and it'll fade that chartreuse and give you a little bit lighter chartreuse color. I've done both tricks. I don't know if they work, obviously, but I get into weird stuff like that. And I have 2 little nail filers that I carry around in my crankbait boxes. And when we were at Kentucky Lake and I was seeing how dull those fish were, I started to do that on this bait here. I was filing all over, and it gets a little scary because you start seeing the filer will be like orange on this one, but the paint never came off. I mean, it just dulled the bait up. It wasn't that glossy finish anymore. And I absolutely slayed them day 2 on this bait. Day 1, I only caught 1. It was a really big one. But day 2, I caught like 14, and it was on that bait. And I dulled the color on those baits for that tournament. I don't know if that works. Just very interesting. JD, great success with Squarebill. The plastic are producing. Love Texas ring cross. Yeah, so JD is the Sutherland man. He's the master of Sutherland. Hopefully we get that lake back, JD. That'd be nice. I don't know if you've heard the recent news, but there's bad rumors going around. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit if we want to. I'll get into 3 or 2 more tips that I have. A lot of you guys know this tip because it's kind of getting out there a lot more. I think even Tactical Bassin talks about it now. I will write the depths of my Squarebills on the baits. So this Spro right here. This is a deeper Squarebill made by Spro. I have a little 8 written on it right there. Not a very good 8 because I have the handwriting of an 8-year-old. But I will write the depths of the Squarebills on all my Squarebills. So this one gets, it's right there. It's on the top of his head. 10 to 14 foot deep. So I write them all just because they're all different. I have some that only go to 3 feet, and then I have some that one goes to 14 feet. I have some that go to 8 feet. I have some that only go to 5 feet. So I want to know exactly where they go. So like this Black Label, I have a 5 written on the bill right there. That tells me I could get it down to 5 feet, and I'm probably not going to get it any deeper. So if I want to fish, the top of a grass bed and I need to get it down to 5 feet, that's a bait that I'd look to grab. Compared to this where I can get this one down to 6 feet, 4 to 6 feet. That's an easy trick. You can ride it underneath the chin of the bait so it doesn't rub off. You could ride it on the bill. Some of the companies are starting to come out with little numbers on their baits, and it tells you exactly how deep they are. And then 13 Fishing's come out with their crankbait, and they've got it etched or grinded into the bill, the depth of how deep it goes. So, and then Rapala's always had their little DT6 on the bill. Dive 2, 6 feet. That's what that means in case you didn't know. But a lot of them don't have that, so I just write it. Makes things a lot faster, and then I'll put them in boxes that, hey, these are my 3 to 5 footers. These are my, 4 to 7. These are my 8 plus. Things like that. Just makes things quicker, and you know which baits to grab for whatever situation you have. And then a third tip, I learned this, I think my dad taught me this, but I've seen it in other videos. If you're getting bit on a crankbait, say on a Squarebill, a lot of times you're bringing those fish in, and every single time you catch a fish, they're on the back hook, and they're only on the back hook. Change colors of your crankbait. And I've had this work here in San Diego plenty of times. So it was actually this bait right here. I was fishing this color. This is called Dragon Craw. and every single fish that I was catching at lower Otay was on the back hook. And there's other ways you can do it. You can put on a red hook up front, and sometimes they key in on that red hook. People believe in that. I'm not too much of a believer, but I want to start trying it out. What I do is if they're biting this one and I keep getting them on the back hook, I'll throw the same exact bait, but I'll change the color completely different. So I'll grab, something like that where they're just two completely different colors, and then all of a sudden you start seeing the bait in the back of their throat and completely engulfed. And it's like, okay, for whatever reason, they're just keyed in on that color a lot better, and they're just coming up and absolutely smashing it compared to every single time I have just the back hook in the fish. That always makes me worried that I'm gonna lose them, and a lot of times I do lose them. So if they're on fire on one bait like that and it's always the back hook, I just switch the color. And like I said, I usually have it behind me a different color, and I'll just throw the different color. So there's some tips that I wrote down, just stuff that I've seen that I know that works for me. And that's pretty much all I got. Again, this could have been in huge detail, but I wanted it to last an hour, and it lasted an hour and 6 minutes. And we pretty much waited around for 6 minutes to get started. So it went perfect. It went an hour. And unfortunately, we didn't have a lot of people on tonight, but I know that stuff is kicking back up. So that's going to end it for Squarebill Crankbait fishing. And then now we can get into after hours. If you've never been here before and seen one of these streams, after hours is whatever you guys want to talk about. Whether that be stuff we could talk about in the future, if we even want to keep doing this in the future, because obviously now there's lakes that are open, so we're not technically locked down anymore. You can fish in certain lakes in San Diego if you haven't heard yet. Murray, Miramar, and Lower Otay just opened. 50% capacity, so you better get in line early. And Lower Otay's first opening day is tomorrow, since all this is kicked off. So if you're gonna go fish Lower Otay, I promise you're gonna need to get there really, really early. Good luck. Let us know how it goes. They should be chewing at Lower Otay, and especially when no one's been there, it should be a good bite. I'm not. I won't be there. I'm gonna go fishing on Sunday, and I'm not sure exactly where yet, but I'm going somewhere. We'll figure that out later. But hopefully you guys get out there. Hopefully you guys catch them. I saw some guys caught them. Steve went out today to Murray and caught some fish. I don't know what he was throwing or what he was doing. I just saw a quick couple photos. G Team, I just watched one of your videos, the jig video. I watched it today. How are you doing in the monthly right now? For those of you guys that don't know, the monthlies in KBF still going on, just because San Diego's been shut down. Everybody else in California can fish pretty much, and Shane, one of our local guys, is doing pretty well. Not San Diego local, but Los Angeles area local. Last time I saw, he was in, I think, second or first for the monthly, KBF monthly. Battling it out with some NorCal guys. And then Yakabas has their monthlies still going on. James Snyder's been running a good show, like always, up there, trying to keep, lines in the water up north. Hopefully we can start joining in on the monthlies, but I would prefer more lakes to get open. I love fishing the monthly tournaments, but if you're only going to allow me to fish 3 lakes and one of those lakes is only open 3 days a week, it's tough. It's tough to compete with those guys. Chasing Shane down. How many days are left? 6 days. 6 days left. Good luck, man. Hopefully you guys, take it first, second. What place are you in right now? So what's everybody been getting bid on that is fishing? What's working right now? If you guys were going to go out tomorrow, what's everybody throwing? I know that if it was me and I was going to Lower Otay tomorrow, I would have a chatterbait for sure. I would have topwater, If I got there super early, I would throw top water. I'd throw a spook. I'd throw a frog. Definitely have a chatterbait tied on. I would bring square bills. I'm not sure how much I would focus on throwing them, to be completely honest, just because I'd probably be more focused on top water, knowing me. I force feed fish a lot if I'm not in a tournament. If I'm fun fishing, I do whatever I want. You know, I don't. It doesn't upset me if I go out there and I don't get bit throwing a frog all day. It really doesn't. I don't get mad. I don't get, I don't feel down because I know I can probably throw a Cinco and catch fish. If I get super desperate, I'll come back the next day and I'll throw a Cinco on a Sunday or something. But I'd rather throw a frog all day long and just pray that a 10 pounder is going to come up and hit it than go catch 9 Cinco fish that are, you know, 17, 18, 19 inches. That's just me. And, I get tired of San Diego fishing and throwing soft plastics all day long. So I try weird stuff. I'm always going to try out different stuff. Big swim baits. I'd have the big swim bait if I was going to Lower Otay tomorrow. Top water in the morning, 2.8 Kayak. Jig. Gosh, I suck at fishing a jig. You guys got to teach me how to fish a jig, because I'm the worst. I know G Team, you're good with that 2.8, man. That Kayak. That's something I've never thrown the 2.8 Kayak by itself. I've thrown them as teasers on an Alabama rig, and that's it. I haven't thrown them by themselves yet. I've thrown the 3.8 plenty of times, but not the 2.8. I know I need to do that. You're in third in KBF and second in Yakabas. Nice, man. Those Yakabas guys aren't going to be happy. If you and Shane go into that Yakabas tournament and take first and second, they won't be happy. Not saying that they don't like us, but when foreign club members come into their club tournament and beat all of them, they're not too happy. And honestly, it surprises me because they have amazing fisheries up there. And, I would love to fish the Delta and have that be my home water. As much as they'd probably get on here and tell me that it's hard to fish the Delta, I don't think it's as hard as fish our lakes, because I've fished both plenty of times and I've done way better at the Delta than I have here. And it's just so much water. It's so much fun. They have everything there at the Delta. There's riprap rocks to throw square bills. There's giant cheese mats to throw frogs. You can get away with, if you're good at one style, you can go work that style as much as you want. And here in San Diego, that's not always the case. Like, for instance, a square bill. It's not often you're going to throw a square bill at, like I said, Miramar or San Vicente. I have thrown a square bill at San Vicente, and I've actually caught a fish doing it, but it's not what it's definitely not going to be the first bait I grab, that's for sure. There's just not a lot of places to throw the square bill at San Vicente. I can do quick drive-bys with it, and that's what I got bit on. Traveling from one place to another where there was just enough shoreline to get a square bill down, and that was about it. And then it drops off to being too deep. And crankbaits at San Vicente are not easy to fish. They get hung up in those tree branches a lot, and it's just, ideally you want to be bumping bottom, and you're not bumping bottom there. Not in 50, 60, 80, 100 feet. Knowles, you've been doing pretty well on the jig, that's for sure. I need to start talking to you and the Alabama rig. We need to have you come on and talk about the Alabama rig, because you do pretty well with that thing. I can't. I'm terrible at it. Let's see what else is going on. What's KBF wise? There is the Colorado Trail. G Team, you're not going to that. I completely forgot. I can't go because of work. Work doesn't allow me to leave more than 60 miles. So I can't go. Is it Utah or Colorado? I can't remember where the KBF Western Region trail event is. It's either Utah or Colorado. Now it's going to annoy me. I'm going to have to look it up. But that's going on. I know Bryce Gibbs, some Arizona guys headed out to that. And, I'm jealous because all that stuff on my schedule is marked down for me to go fish it. And my schedule is open to go fish right now. And I can't fish because the Navy has me locked down. Bubba Bass, thanks for joining, man. Colorado. Yeah, I wish I can be there. Hopefully everybody stays safe out there in Colorado, and good luck to all the people. I don't know if anybody's watching from there right now, but they're probably preparing for that tournament tomorrow. That tournament's tomorrow. I'll be following along. I'll be rooting for the Arizona guys just because they're awesome people, and we've helped each other out a lot in the past. So I'll be rooting for Arizona to take that one home. I don't really know anybody from Colorado. I'm sure I fished against a few of them, but definitely hoping Arizona takes that one. That reservoir is crazy. I did a lot of research on it already, thinking I was going to fish it until this whole virus kicked off and took that away from me. But it's very clear. It's very San Diego-like, the way you would fish it. And my plan to go fish that tournament, I had it written down in all my notes, was big glide baits. I was going to fish that tournament by going big or going home. Either go for the win or probably get skunked, or a one fish type of tournament. But my plan was to go there with all my big glide baits in that crystal clear water, post spawn or the spawn, depending on what the water temperature was going to depend on what glide baits that I was going to throw, or big wake baits that I was going to throw. And I was going to try to go big. A jerk bait is probably another bait that people should be throwing out there. Mike, I will not be drop shotting. No way. But in the tournament, that might win it, honestly. Big, deep, not big. It's a small lake, but small little crater lake. But it's crystal clear water, so I'm sure tons of people will be throwing the drop shot tomorrow. It wouldn't be me unless I absolutely had to. How's Mike been doing? Thanks for hanging in there, Mike. I feel like I haven't seen you guys in forever, man. Hopefully you guys are getting out and going fishing. The reports came back pretty good today. If you go on San Diego Bass Fishing page, guys caught them. Yeah, they canceled our local tournament. Bryce Run sucks. Yeah, it does suck. But the good news is for San Diego, we'll see what happens. I don't think Mark Chrisman's on tonight. I know that guy gets worked to death, but we have the Otay tournament coming here, KBF. I don't know what's going to happen with that. It'd be interesting. I wish Mark was on. He probably wouldn't tell us anything yet anyways, but I would be interested to hear if that's still going to go down or not. Somebody may know that answer already, and I don't. But it's always in July, so it was a July tournament, and technically Lower Otay is open right now, but it's only at 50% capacity, and that would be the part that would burn us is, what happens if we try to run a tournament and the guys that signed up for the tournament can't get in the lake because other boaters got in before them. So I don't know what would happen for that. But who knows? Maybe we get that Lower Otay tournament back here. And I kind of lost, all of my information on the tournaments in the Western region because when this happened, I gave up. It was just like, well, my tournament season's done. And that's something that I like a lot, especially KBF. Some guys... we were talking about this the other day. I was actually talking to a guy at work about this. Some guys take the local club scene very serious. Some guys take KBF very serious. Other guys don't even sign up for KBF and they only fish the local clubs. And then some guys only fish KBF and they don't fish the local clubs. So you've got a mixture of people. I would say that I'm a lot more focused and driven in the KBF scene than I am the local scene. I prepare a lot more. We'll put it that way. I would feel better about winning a KBF one than I would a local one, just because um, I like to travel and I like to fish lakes that are up and down California. Um, the local clubs are cool, but I'm just not good here. It's something that guys that fish certain ways, finessey style of fishing, do better than I do. And if I try to adapt and fish like that, I suck, and they're going to beat me every time. So occasionally, I do good at a local lake. It's usually Hodges or one of those ones that fish my strength a lot more. But if we get into, you know, lower Otay, for instance, I don't have a ton of confidence at lower Otay like some guys do, and that has shown in the past for sure. Um, I named that tournament this year my redemption tournament, the redemption tour, lower Otay, episode 3 for me, because my last 2 KBF tournaments at lower Otay, I have yet to get a limit, and it's technically my home lake, and that's insanely embarrassing. I skunked last year at lower Otay in the KBF tournament, and that was the most disappointed I think I've been in my life fishing a tournament. I didn't even stick around. I did have other things going on. I didn't leave because I got skunked, but I was glad I had other things going on and didn't have to stick around because it was bad. So hopefully we get that one, because I'm ready to try to figure that lake out and do well. The year before I only caught 3. I didn't get my limit. So it's my home lake, and I have yet to catch a limit in a tournament on it. So I got to figure it out. How are the lakes dealing with the 50% capacity issue? So what I heard, Mike, was I always forget that I can do this. Let's see if it's going to work. Oh, come on. What I heard is they're counting vehicles. So it goes by the parking lot and the spaces in the parking lot. So however many spaces they have available, which at Lower Otay, there's not a lot of parking there. That parking lot's pretty small. And unfortunately, they're not going to count the gravel where the kayakers park. So they're just going to count vehicles, and however many parking spots they have, once they hit the halfway point, they will send the rest of the people home that are in line if they're too late to get in. That's the rumor that I heard. That's what people were telling me when I was asking them on the San Diego Bass page the other day. So I'm not sure, but if that is indeed true, then that's why I was telling people you better get there real early, especially Lower Otay, because that's not a big parking lot. There's not a ton of spaces. You've got the right side and you've got the left side, but I mean, I don't think there's, I don't think there's 80 parking spaces there. There's probably not even close to 80, which means 40 boats. And when you've had this long of a closure and you only give us 3 lakes to fish, I mean, 40 boats will be out there in no time, and guys were already talking about staying the night out there. So that's why I said I won't be going fishing tomorrow, and I'll probably try on Sunday, but it wouldn't surprise me if I got turned away at a lake, because I'm not going to get there crazy early. I'm not getting there 3 hours before it opens. I'll just turn around and wait my turn, wait for hopefully more lakes to open up. But does anybody plan on fishing tomorrow? Is anybody going out and testing those new lakes that are open, Miramar, Murray, or Lower Otay? Be curious what your plans are on time, what time you're going to get there, and hopefully it works out, because it would suck to get all your stuff loaded up, get down there, wait in line, and then get turned around. I know I would not be happy. And then another thing is that I was wondering is, well, when people go home, is that just it in the morning? Say you get 40 boats, it's the first 40, and then it's done for the whole rest of the day. They shut the lake down the whole rest of the day, nobody comes in. Because if guys leave, there's guys that aren't going to fish the full day. That's a fact. So if you wanted to go there and go only for the night hours and go get on a topwater night bite at lower Otay, right now, which is probably pretty good, are you able to go through the gate at that point? Because obviously somebody has gone home by that point. There's still not 40 boats out on the water. But I don't think they're going to be there counting cars leaving and all that stuff. I think once they get 40, it's done. So we'll see. I don't know. I'm curious to see how all this goes down. Chip Gilbert, for you local San Diego guys, you guys know probably who he is. He's still fighting the fight, and I guess he was on the news tonight talking about it again. I didn't see it. I didn't record it. But, hopefully we win this battle of all this crazy rumors that are going around about closing lakes full time, like Sutherland. That's a rumor. And Barrett. I mean, 2 lakes that you could actually catch fish at, and you're going to close them down. There's going to be some people that aren't too happy. Again, guys, we've been on for an hour and almost a half. Don't feel like you got to stick around. You're not going to fin me if you leave. We didn't have great numbers tonight anyways. So it's I'm just here to hang out until everybody leaves, and then I'll sign off. I got nothing going on. No work tomorrow, no fishing tomorrow. So I'm ready, and eventually I'm going to get out there, hopefully Sunday, and we'll see where I'm going, and I'll report back to you guys on how I did. But I'm ready to tournament fish. I don't know about you guys. I'm ready to get back in the local club scene and definitely move around and travel a little bit, and hopefully head to Berryessa and Clear Lake for sure. I want to do Clear Lake again this year. For those of you that have never done Clear Lake, you need to. It's a blast. Going to Otay, but I don't care to go crazy early. Yeah, Mike, that's for sure. I think Wednesday would be the way to go, honestly. I hope you do good on Wednesday. I might be able to get out there on Wednesday. I don't have anything going on work right now. We're in a lull, so I could probably get out there on Wednesday. It'll just depend on family, what's going on family-wise. But let us know how it goes. I hope you crush them, and I hope they're just ready to hit every lure that's thrown their way, since it's been, no one's been fishing that place in however long. So tomorrow's opening day. I'm sure we're going to see some good numbers. Yeah, so they're talking about it right now. I'm reading San Diego Bass Fishing. Rob wrote, "How many are camping at Otay tonight?" And then there's 22 comments. So we'll see. We'll see how crazy that's going to be. Some guy already posted a picture of being in line. So I don't know if he's playing a joke or if he's for real, but there's a dude with a picture in line 58 minutes ago. So I mean, that's how crazy this is going to get. Guys are going to start camping out to be able to fish lakes. They need to just open all of them. That would be amazing, because them opening 3, we already know what's going to happen. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that tons of people are going to show up. They're going to have to send a bunch of people home. People probably aren't going to be 6 feet away from each other when they walk around the lake and they do their hiking and their jogging and all that stuff. And then they're going to say that we can't follow the rules, and, I can just see bad things happening. If they would open the lake, it would spread out. If they would open all the lakes, it'd spread all of us out, and we'd be a lot farther away from each other if that was the case. No problem, JD, man. This was, this is just kind of our local club thing. Again, hopefully we can get you fishing with us. For those of you guys that don't know JD, I play softball with him. He's an awesome softball player. Our team is pretty good. We're getting a lot better. And he fishes from a kayak. He's up in Ramona. So hopefully he'll be able to come out and fish the club with us. And hopefully we'll be playing softball soon, JD, because I'm ready. We'll see. I've been checking back and seeing if they've opened it yet, the Santee Sports Complex, but we'll see. Appreciate you tuning in, man. You didn't have to. I told you it wouldn't be the most exciting show ever, but we did this just because we were bored and a couple guys were talking baits, and it was like maybe other guys want to talk about stuff, and hopefully we could all just learn from each other. So it's always an open discussion. Tonight it wasn't that open. Not a lot of people chimed in. Probably the least open discussion that we've had, but I think Squarebill Crankbait fishing around here is just foreign to a lot of people, especially if they've grown up here in San Diego. It's just not a comfort bait for people. Soft plastics is, the bread and butter for a lot of guys here, and it's the same way in Florida. My dad lives in Florida. He retired to bass fish in Florida, and he's a diehard crankbait fisherman. It's where I got it from. He grew up in Michigan. He lives in Florida, and that's all he talks about. Nobody there throws crankbaits. They're all so focused on soft plastics and speed worms and chatterbaits that he says every time he goes out, he's the only one throwing one. That's kind of how I feel in San Diego, but there are guys that throw it, especially at certain lakes. But hopefully you guys learned something. It would have been nice to hear other people telling me they throw the Squarebill, but I didn't think there was going to be that many people talking about it. I was glad that people voted for it because I enjoy talking about it, and we'll put up another one. Hopefully we'll keep this going. I'll probably make a post tomorrow asking if guys want to keep this going and make this like a weekly thing for however long we want. But if guys are interested in doing it and keep on coming on and helping me out, then yeah. But, it sucks being on here by myself just because I like hearing input from other people. I like hearing other people's ideas. And this isn't intended for me to be the person, but if I don't get volunteers, someone's got to do it. So I told Mark Chrisman I'd be fine doing any topic. And I would do the research to have enough information to put out there, even if I'm not good at that certain topic at all. So hopefully I'll get people that are comfortable talking about stuff. And if you ever want to come on, anybody that's still left, there's only 3 of us. Anybody that wants to come on and talk and you're comfortable talking about a topic that got voted for, just let me know, and we will get you up to speed. We'll get you up to speed on how to come on here. It's really easy. You just have to have Skype. I will guide you through everything. I'll make it super easy for you, and then just get on and share some knowledge with us. And again, you don't have to be an expert. Nobody expects you to be an expert at any of this stuff. We're kayak club fishermen, weekend warriors. That's all we are. So nobody expects like the dynamite secrets or you don't have to share secrets either. If you've got secrets you don't want to share, then don't share them. I tell people that have come on with me here before, you don't have to talk about what you don't want to talk about. So share whatever you want. But there's only 3 of us left, so I'm going to get out of here. I appreciate you guys tuning in, as always. Can't wait to get out on the water and fish with you guys again. Hopefully the club gets back up soon. Hopefully you guys stay safe and enjoy fishing, and you get out there and you're able to get on the water. I'm going to expand the sponsors, so you guys can check out the sponsors real quick and make sure to help these people out. They sponsor us, they get us on the water, they help us with our tournaments, they give us free prizes. So help them out in return. Purchase some stuff. Go to East County Bait and Tackle and set a tackle warehouse every once in a while. TRC Covers makes great covers. OEX, Fastlane, the kayak shops here, they sell a bunch of stuff from accessories to kayaks or whatever you need, and everything else on here. Great sponsorships. They help us out. So in return, hopefully you guys can help them out. And again, that is our SoCal Kayak Anglers cover page on our Facebook page. So if you want to check out who sponsors us, that's where I stole that photo from. But again, I appreciate you guys tuning in. Good luck if you go fishing this weekend. Let us know how it goes. Stay safe, and hopefully I will see you guys back again next week. Thank you.